My name is Lucy. And the last words my father ever said to me before slamming the door were, "If you won't obey, you don't belong here." I was 19. All I did was say no. No to the future he picked for me. No to marrying the man he chose. No to a life that wasn't mine. That one word shattered everything. I still remember the way his voice didn't shake, just final. Like he was cutting off a limb. Only the limb was me. He tossed me out with no money, no backup plan, and no one to call. And for years, I disappeared from the family tree, the family photos, and his pride. But 10 years later, I came back. Not to ask for a place, but to walk into the building that now bore my name. And he had to watch. It happened in the middle of dinner. My father was sitting at the head of the table. Like always, perfectly knotted. Voice calm but heavy. The kind of man who didn't raise his voice, because everyone already feared what came after silence. He was halfway through explaining the plan. A future carved for me without my input. James comes from a good family, he said, slicing his steak with surgical precision. His father and I have done business for years. Marriage would solidify our position. I put down my fork. "I'm not marrying him," I said. The room froze. My mother's eyes widened. My older brother looked away. Even the housekeeper paused in the hallway. My father didn't flinch. He just looked at me. "What did you say?" "I said no," I repeated. "I'm not going to marry someone just to secure your legacy." He leaned back slowly, studying me like I was a puzzle missing its most important piece. "You don't get to say no, Lucy. This isn't about feelings. This is about duty, about loyalty." "No," I said again, firmer this time. "It's about control." And with that, something snapped. He stood up, not fast, but deliberate, pulled out a small envelope from his coat, and tossed it onto the table in front of me. Inside was a check, a single line scrawled at the bottom. "Final support payment. Do not return. Pack your things," he said. "You leave tonight." I didn't cry. I didn't beg. I looked at my mother. She blinked but said nothing. My brother kept chewing. It was like no one wanted to catch the fire in his eyes. So I stood up, walked upstairs, packed a duffel bag. No suitcases, no goodbyes, just the bare minimum. And that night, as I stepped out of the house I'd grown up in, no one followed me. The front door shut behind me with a quiet, echoing click. That's how exile sounds. I walked for over an hour with no destination. No one had ever taught me how to open a bank account on my own, let alone how to survive. But something inside me, something that had been whispering for years, finally screamed, "You did the right thing." For the first time, I had chosen myself, even if that choice cost me everything. That night, I slept on the floor of a friend's studio apartment, curled up next to a radiator with a single blanket and no idea what tomorrow would look like. But I'd rather be cold and free than warm and owned. That was the moment my real life began. Not in comfort, but in conviction. The first few weeks were a blur of survival. I stayed with my college friend Naomi, who lived in a cramped studio above a noisy laundromat. She didn't ask questions, just handed me a pillow and said, "Bathroom's on the left. Lock, stick, skick it twice." It was the kindest thing anyone had done for me in a long time. During the day, I wandered the city with a tattered backpack and a notebook full of half-baked plans. I applied to every job that didn't require a degree, a resume, or a family name. Waitressing, receptionist, night shift cleaning. I finally landed a job, bussing tables at a rundown diner that smelled like burnt coffee and old bacon grease. The pay was awful, the hours worse, but it was mine. And for the first time in my life, no one was hovering over my shoulder telling me how to behave, how to speak, how to smile. I was free and terrified. I stretched every dollar, ate ramen 5 nights a week, took cold showers, sold my designer shoes on resale apps for a few $100. But even in the tightest moments, I refused to call home. I remembered the look on my father's face when I said no. It wasn't anger. It was disbelief. As if I'd broken some sacred contract by choosing myself. He thought I'd come crawling back, but every hunger pang, every sleepless night, every moment I sat awake wondering if I'd made a mistake only made me more certain. I wasn't going to prove him right. One night, while waiting for the last bus, I passed a lit-up co-working space. Inside, people my age sat hunched over laptops, whiteboards scribbled with flowcharts behind them. It looked like chaos and hope wrapped into one. I stood at the window for 10 minutes, just watching. Then I started showing up during my off hours at first, just reading through the glass, then eventually sneaking into the free community workshops they offered on coding, marketing, product design. I sat in the back, took notes, asked questions. No one cared that I didn't have a degree or a resume. They cared that I was trying. And slowly, piece by piece, I started learning, not just how to survive, but how to build. At night, I still slept on Naomi's floor. But during the day, I was building a quiet foundation. I didn't know where it would lead, but I knew one thing for sure. The life my father tried to force me into, it wasn't mine. The life I was slowly, stubbornly carving from nothing, the very uncertain, exhausted inch of it was. I didn't have a degree, didn't have connections, didn't have anything real except a cracked laptop Naomi loaned me and an obsession with never going back. I worked the early morning shift at the diner, then spent afternoons at the public library, fingers numb from the cheap keyboard, eyes burning from hours of YouTube tutorials. I taught myself how to code, then how to design, then how to build something that worked even if it looked ugly at first. I didn't sleep much. Some nights, Naomi would come home and find me, passed out on her floor with open notebooks scattered around me like fallen leaves. "You know you're allowed to rest, right?" she'd whisper, tossing a blanket over my shoulders. But rest felt like weakness, and weakness felt like going back. One evening, while debugging a simple web form, I had a thought. What if I built a platform, not for money, but to solve a problem I knew intimately? I knew what it was like to be lost, to have no roadmap, no help, no place to land. What if I could build something for people like me? That night, I sketched out the first concept of what would later become Ruteda Digital Toolkit for people starting over, financial literacy for estranged youth, job hunting templates, emotional wellness guides, and legal resources for those cut off from family support. It wasn't fancy. It wasn't sleek. But it was real. And it was mine. I applied for a 500 micro grant from a local startup incubator. I still remember sitting in the back of the pitch room, wearing the one blazer I owned, knees shaking, waiting to be called. When my name was announced, I stood up slowly. No slides, no flash, just a voice I was still learning to trust. I told them the truth. I told them I had no degree, no pedigree, and no investors, but I knew what it felt like to wake up with nothing and try to make something that could help someone else not feel so alone. The room was quiet when I finished. Then someone clapped, and then another. And then I got the grant. $500. It felt like 5 million. With that tiny check, I bought a real domain, paid a freelance developer to help me clean up some back-end code, and pushed the first beta version of Rooted live. At first, nothing happened. Then someone on Reddit found it. Then someone on TikTok. Then a nonprofit reached out asking if they could partner. The traffic exploded. And I sat there at Naomi's tiny kitchen table, staring at the screen, crying over a dashboard full of real users, real people finding help through something I built with nothing but stubbornness and second-hand Wi-Fi. That night, I didn't just feel proud, I felt something else. For the first time since my father kicked me out, I realized I had created value without anyone's permission. No gatekeeper, no approval, just me, and a life I was building from the wreckage. And it was working. I met Harper Langley at a community tech expo 6 months after Rooted went live. I was there as a last-minute speaker. One of the organizers had seen my project online and asked if I could share how I got started. I almost said no. I still didn't feel like I belonged on any kind of stage. But Naomi pushed me. "You built something from scratch, Lucy," she said. "That's worth more than 10 Ivy League degrees." So I went. I wore my usual black jeans, a thrifted blazer, and a t-shirt that said, "Self-taught to self-made." It was nerve-wracking at first, but the audience was kind. I talked about sleeping on floors, about being kicked out, about the endless search for dignity. I didn't know that Harper was in the front row until after. She approached me during the break. Tall, calm, dressed like the kind of woman who didn't ask for power, walked in with it. "You're Lucy Monroe?" she asked. "Just Lucy," I replied. She smiled. "I'm Harper. I run Langley Impact Group. We back ideas that don't have family money behind them." I blinked. "That's oddly specific." "It's personal," she said. "You have 10 minutes for a coffee." We sat in the corner of the venue with paper cups, and I told her everything. Not a pitch, just the truth. About the diner, the grant, the thousands of users who now logged in every month looking for tools, for answers, for hope. Harper didn't interrupt once. When I was done, she leaned in and said, "You know you've already done what most founders never do. You proved it matters." Then she slid a card across the table. "Come see me next week. I think we can help each other." That meeting changed everything. Langley Impact became Rooted's first angel investor, small, strategic, no strings attached. They gave me space to hire a tiny team, move into a real workspace, and finally sleep on something other than a floor. But Harper gave me more than funding. She gave me language. She helped me stop apologizing for being scrappy, taught me how to navigate rooms filled with men who'd never been told no, showed me that being underestimated wasn't a weakness, it was leverage. One afternoon, after a tough pitch meeting, she looked at me and said, "Your father kicked you out for saying no. That was the beginning, Lucy, not the end. Never confuse rejection with a finish line." I wrote those words on a sticky note and kept it on my laptop for the next 3 years. Every time I felt like I didn't belong, every time I heard my father's voice in my head telling me I was a disappointment, I read it again, and I kept going. Because now, I had something better than permission. I had direction. The first time Rooted hit 100, 0 users, I thought it was a glitch. I refreshed the analytics page 3 times, then just stared at it. 100,000 people, most of them young, most of them invisible to the world, were logging into something I built in the margins of my life. Something that didn't just exist, but mattered. I didn't scream or jump up and down. I just closed my laptop and cried, quietly. The kind of crying that doesn't come from sadness, but from a release, a remembering of that first night on Naomi's floor, clutching my duffel bag, wondering if I'd made the worst mistake of my life. That girl had no idea what was coming. We scaled quickly. With Harper's strategic investment, I hired a designer, a back-end developer, and a community manager. We ran live workshops, launched a mobile app, built partnerships with shelters and advocacy groups, and all the while, I refused to forget where it started. Every new employee had to spend a week shadowing the help desk inbox. I wanted everyone to feel what I'd felt, real stories from real people. A 17-year-old who ran away from a forced marriage, A trans youth banned from their home. A college freshman whose parents disowned her after she chose a different major. Rooted became a map in the dark. And we made damn sure the light stayed on. A year in, a major tech magazine reached out. They wanted to do a feature, the platform changing how estranged youth survive adulthood. I almost declined. I wasn't ready to be seen, but Harper nudged me. This isn't about you being ready. It's about them knowing you exist. The photo shoot was surreal. Me, in a real office being interviewed not as that girl who got kicked out, but as a founder, a builder, a leader. The article dropped on a Thursday. By Saturday, I had 42 missed calls from numbers I didn't recognize. On Sunday morning, I got the one that made my hands shake. It was my brother. I hadn't spoken to him in 10 years. His voice was cautious, like he wasn't sure if I'd hang up. Hey, Lucy, I saw the article. Dad saw it too. I didn't say anything. He continued. He wants to talk. I waited, then said calmly, "What would we talk about?" There was a pause. Then he admitted, "I don't know, but he's been pacing around for days." I could picture it, me father, in his perfect office, rereading my name in print, trying to decide if he was proud or furious. Probably both. But here's the thing. I didn't feel what I thought I would. No rage. No longing. No need to explain. Just clarity. The kind you get when you finally climb out of a deep, dark hole and realize you're standing on solid ground now, and the people who buried you can no longer touch you. I told my brother, I'm open to a conversation, but not to a performance. And I meant it, because I wasn't chasing validation anymore. I was building something that didn't need his name to stand tall. It had mine. It started with silence. Then came the whispers. After the article came out, people from my past began reaching out some with cautious curiosity, others with guilt cloaked in nostalgia. An old classmate messaged me, "Hey, didn't our dads do business together? You're killing it. Let's catch up." A distant aunt forwarded me the article with the subject line, "So proud of you, sweetheart. Always knew you were special." She hadn't spoken to me since the day I was kicked out. But the one message that froze me came late one night. From him, no subject, no greeting, just, "Let's talk, Dad." I stared at it for a long time. Not because I didn't know what to say, but because for the first time, I wasn't sure I needed to say anything. He sent 2 more emails after that, each more formal, more careful. The third read, "I saw the platform you built. It's impressive. We should meet." No apology, no acknowledgement, just a clean, business-like sentences if we were strangers negotiating terms. That was always his way. When he couldn't control the story, he tried to reframe it. But I wasn't interested in edits. Harper noticed something was off during one of our check-ins. "You've been quiet," she said, sipping her tea. "Not your usual laser-focused self." "My father's trying to reconnect," I said. She raised an eyebrow. "With grace or strategy?" "Strategy. Probably damage control. Public perception. Maybe even regret, but not the kind that comes from love." She nodded slowly, then asked, "What do you want from this?" That question haunted me for days. What did I want? Closure? Revenge? A moment of reckoning, where I finally say everything I couldn't say at 19? I wasn't sure. But I knew what I didn't want. I didn't want to be sucked back into orbit around a man who once threw me out like broken glass. A week later, I received a formal invitation. A gala event. At the bottom, in delicate cursive, honoring Monroe family legacy in civic development. I almost laughed. There it was, again, the attempt to rewrite history, to fold my success back into his narrative. What he didn't know was that I had already accepted an invitation of my own, one that mattered far more. Rooted had just finalized a deal with the city to open its first physical resource, Hubar Real, walk-in space for youth in crisis, built in a downtown building long abandoned and now restored. And on the morning of the ribbon cutting, as the press gathered and my team stood beside me, someone pointed across the plaza. "That man, is that your father?" He stood at a distance, hands in his coat pockets, watching. I didn't wave, didn't nod, didn't move, because that day wasn't about him. It was about every step I took since the night he shut that door. And each one had brought me here. The building was made of brick and glass. Clean, modern, and open, exactly the opposite of the house I was thrown out of a decade ago. We named it the Rooted Center. For kids with nowhere to go, for young adults rebuilding from scratch, for people who, like me, had been told, "You don't belong here." Now, they had a place. And that place had my name carved into the front wall, small, subtle, but mine. As I stepped outside after the ribbon-cutting ceremony, camera flashes followed. The mayor had just shaken my hand. Local press asked about our mission. My team was glowing with pride. Then I saw him, my father, standing at the edge of the crowd in a tailored navy suit, hands behind his back, watching. He didn't smile, he didn't scowl either, just studied me the way he always had measured, calculating, as if trying to figure out how I'd gotten here without him. I hadn't planned for this moment, but my feet moved toward him anyway. We stood face to face for the first time in 10 years. He broke the silence. "You look different." "I am different," I said. A pause. "This place is impressive," he added, glancing toward the building. "You've built something meaningful." I waited, arms folded, offering him nothing. Then he asked the question I knew was coming. "Would you consider having dinner with me? Just to talk, to clear the air?" I could have said a lot in that moment. I could have asked why he never called after that night, why he watched me walk into the dark with nothing but a duffel bag, why it took public recognition for him to remember he had a daughter. But instead, I asked, "What is it you want to clear exactly?" He opened his mouth, then closed it again. For once, he didn't seem to have the perfect line ready. I kept my voice steady. "You kicked me out for saying no, and now you want a seat at a table I built without you?" He looked away. "I was trying to protect our family," he said. I laughed once, quiet and sharp. "No, you were trying to protect your version of it." I could feel the heat rising in my chest, anger, sorrow, power, but I didn't let it explode. I held it, like fire in a lantern. I stepped closer. "When you threw me out, you didn't just cut me off financially. You erased me. From the family photos, from holiday cards, from conversations. You pretended I never existed." "I was wrong," he admitted, voice low. "I know," I said, "but that doesn't mean I want you back in my life." His jaw tensed. He had never been on the receiving end of finality. But I wasn't finished. "You taught me something important that night," I said. "You taught me that losing everything doesn't kill you. It wakes you up, and from that day forward, I built a life not out of revenge, but out of relief." "Relief?" he repeated. "Yes, relief that I no longer had to perform for your approval, that I no longer had to twist myself into the version you wanted." He didn't respond, didn't argue, didn't apologize, because there was nothing left to say. The weight of the moment didn't fall on me, it fell on him. He had spent 10 years expecting me to break. But I didn't break. I broke through. I took a breath, then finished. "I wish you peace. Truly. But I don't owe you my time, my story, or my presence. Not anymore." Then I turned and walked back toward the building. My building. People clapped as I rejoined the group, not for the confrontation, but for the woman who had made this happen. For Lucy, not daughter of, just Lucy, I never went to that dinner. My father followed up once an email that said simply, "If you change your mind, you know where to find me." But I didn't reply. Not out of cruelty, not out of anger, but because I no longer needed anything from that place. Closure didn't live in a restaurant booth. It lived in every step I'd taken away from him, every moment I chose myself, every night I went to bed knowing I hadn't compromised who I was for who someone else wanted me to be. A few weeks after the ribbon cutting, I returned to the Rooted Center on a quiet afternoon. The main lobby smelled like fresh paint and possibility. Two teens sat on the couch flipping through pamphlets. A young woman spoke with our counselor in a corner room. Everything buzzed softly with life, with second chances. I walked into the hallway where our core values were printed on the wall. The last one read, "You are not broken. You were just planted somewhere shallow." I ran my fingers across the words. That used to be me, buried in a place too small, too cold, too controlled. But seeds only need one thing to grow: space. I gave myself that space. And now, I bloom. That evening, Naomi came by my apartment with takeout and a bottle of wine. We curled up on the couch like we used to in the old days. Only now the floor wasn't concrete, the blankets weren't borrowed, and the fear was gone. "You know," she said, "he's probably still pacing around trying to figure out how he lost you." I smiled, sipping my wine. "He never had me. He had a version of me he could control. That version is gone." She leaned her head on my shoulder. "I'm proud of you, Lucy." "I'm proud of me too," I whispered. And for once, I meant it. Sometimes, people ask if I ever think about reconnecting with my family. I do think about them, but not with longing. I think of them the way you think about an old house you used to live, in a place that once held you, and then didn't. A place that taught you something. A place you outgrew. I don't need to walk back through that door to know who I am. I'm not the runaway. I'm not the mistake. I'm not the girl who disobeyed. I'm the woman who refused to disappear. And now, my name isn't spoken with shame or silence. It's carved into stone, lit up on buildings, whispered in stories of survival. Not because I was chosen, but because I chose myself.